We're talking about sacrifice now. But I'm saying today it's got to go from external to internal. You have to give it everything you got, because it's not about where you come from. It's about heart. You come to a place where, being smart ain't enough. You got to have heart, because I realized I got to commit my very being to this thing. I got to breathe it, I got to eat it, I got to sleep it. And until you get there, you'll never be successful in life. I'm talking about going deep now, giving up stuff. The most important thing is this: to be able at any moment to sacrifice what you are for what you will become.
What is up, YouTube? Live via satellite here, and today we are talking Kingdom, manga chapter 590. Now this chapter, guys, was more of a setup chapter, but this chapter gave us a lot of good information. And even though it wasn't much, it still progressed the story just a tad bit closer to the grand finale of what's shaping up to be Kingdom's longest arc. And we definitely can't forget to talk about this clean cover page, because you know what? The GOAT himself is on there. But it's mainly showing people from the first arc, because this is pretty much a promotion for the live action movie that's dropping in the next couple months. And looking at Ten on this cover, I can't help but to think about how much she's grown, but also thinking about the fact that in her current strategical matchup against Chigaryu, I'm expecting to see even more growth and see her reach a new level. And I know a lot of people aren't expecting too much from her, but I'm going to place my belief and trust in Ten and just hope that she doesn't let me down.
If you don't mind going first, step up here on this chair and close your eyes. All right, and then everybody fill in, and we're going to ask you to fall, and then they will catch you. So you have to trust us. So I'm going to count to 3. Just relax and fall. Okay? 1, 2, 3. No, wait, no!
Alright, so the chapter starts out with Osen and his men overlooking the battlefield, and they see that the right wing has already started to attack the Zao, even though the sun has just barely come up. But it is stated here that with no food left, they really can't afford to waste any time. But then we begin to focus in on Denrimi, who always seems to be puzzled by Osen's moves. And the current pieces he's trying to put together is, with them on a time limit, why didn't Osen send reinforcements to the right battlefield so that they could quickly wrap their battle up on that side? But Denrimi quickly answers his own question, realizing that he can't make that move because of the intense pressure from Roboku directly in front of them. But Osen, as if reading the thoughts of Denrimi, tells him that the opposite is true as well. And that's when Denrimi realizes that he's right, because Roboku hasn't sent any more reinforcements from his side either. And he even goes on to conclude that the keys to this battle are actually within the hands of the right wing. And looking back over this very interesting conversation, you may have thought I just glossed over the fact that Osen can read minds. But I really didn't, because honestly guys, I wasn't even surprised. Seeing that Osen is the mentalist that he is, I would have been more surprised if he couldn't read minds. As a matter of fact, I'm willing to bet if he were here right now, he could read your minds as well.
Think of a number between 1 and 10. Got the number? Good. Multiply that number times 2. Okay, add 8 to that number, plus 8. Now that you're caught up, go ahead and divide by 2. Now, take your current number and subtract the original number that you thought of, the 1 through 10 number. Okay, so that leaves you with an alphabet correlation. So, first letter A is number 1. 19 is S. Does that make sense? Good. Go find your number that correlates with the letter, take that letter and think of a country. Any country you can think of that starts with that letter. Good, got it? So go ahead and take the second letter in that country's name and think of an animal that starts with that letter. Got it in your mind? Good, think of the color of that animal. So if I did my mind reading correct, you were thinking of a gray elephant in Denmark.
And then we find ourselves switching over to Zao Center Army's HQ. And here we're getting a mirror image of everything that was said on the Shin side, but now from the Zao perspective. Kimmo is pointing out the fact that they haven't sent reinforcements to their left wing, because now with Osen so close, if they were to make any move like that, then Osen would immediately attack and try to exploit that opening. But Roboku, like Osen on the other side, tells Kimmo that it works both ways. And he explains to them that pretty much everything the right wing has gone through, from losing Akko to losing Ohan, Osun hasn't been able to reinforce them due to the fact that Raboku hasn't sent any more reinforcements since he sent Gyeun. And that's when they all realized that not only has Raboku helped his left wing by not sending more reinforcements, but he's also put Osun in even more of a bind considering their food shortage. But Raboku also adds that he believes that this invisible battle between Osun and himself shall soon draw to a close. And Kane jumps in also believing this to be true, because the way she sees it, the Zhao have the advantage because the only one left of note standing in Shin's right wing is none other than Shin. Prompting Raboku to agree, saying that with the Zhao's left wing emerging as the victors, their small victory will allow them to triumph over the entire battle of the Sukai Plains. So something that actually struck me as interesting in this conversation, besides the fact that Raboku's underestimating Shin again, was when Raboku was talking about the invisible battle between him and Osun. And I feel like we really already discussed this before, but recently I've been getting a lot of comments about, do I think Raboku and Osun will actually clash? And the thing is, I love Raboku saying this because we've actually been seeing them clash all along. It just hasn't been a physical battle like we all wanted, but every time one makes a move, the other is forced to either react or counter, almost as if they're in one-on-one combat. But please don't get me wrong, even though I'm enjoying seeing this invisible battle, nothing beats the real thing. And then we find ourselves in the midst of battle with the Shin unit, and we see that these guys are giving it their all. And the thing that impressed me most wasn't the fact that Kyokai or Denyu were slaughtering people. That's something we expect. But what really showed me that the Shin unit meant business today was when I seen the most negative person from last chapter, Ko, out here making gains.
Damn, man, look at that. We making all kinds of gains. All kinds.
Then over at the Shin unit headquarters, we see Ten giving out orders while at the same time receiving both good and bad news about what's going on the battlefield. Even though she sees on one hand they're pressing forward, on the other hand she's hearing reports that people like Taku-san and Kyogai are struggling a bit. And if you really pay attention, you can almost see that Ten's not even responding to the negative news, to the point that one of the soldiers actually tells Ten if Kyogai doesn't get any help soon, that him and his unit may actually be done for. And this is where we find out what Ten's plan is, that they at the HQ will not be sending out any reinforcements. The reason being is because they need to go all out on the offensive today, and even though this sounds cold of Ten, they reached a point where they can't help everyone, and that people on an individual level are going to need to overcome the odds if they have any chance at winning. But it's not all bad, because we do get to see that Ten actually set up a little bit of a backup plan for this situation. And as we go into the flashback, we see that Ten is giving a specific job to both En and Shosa. Because of the fact that they're going on an all-out offensive today, she's entrusting rescue and reinforcements to the both of them. And the reason she chose these two was because En has very good knowledge of all the units, and he can see very well from his mounted position, while Shosa has a wide field of vision on the ground. But this responsibility comes with some very specific orders from Ten. And those are to only help those who should be helped, and that if a spot is beyond salvation, to not even try in the first place. And even though she apologizes to them for giving them such a heavy burden, Shosa says that it's okay, because she's always had to shoulder this pain, and today she can leave it up to them. And this was actually a pretty touching moment between the three of these guys. We all know deep down Ten doesn't want to abandon anyone, so you can tell just how hard this is just for her alone. But it also seems like this is something that's going to be necessary for Ten if she's ever going to be able to progress to the next level. And back in the present, we actually get to see this in action, as we see En and Shosa going about saving who they can while avoiding the places that can't be saved. And the narrator actually lets us know that the fighting style being used by the Shin unit could only be described as allowing the enemy to cut your flesh so that you can break their bones. And that even though it was reckless and devoid of any thought of defense, both En and Shosa's efforts allowed them to prevent their losses from being too fatal. Meanwhile, on the offense, we see that the Hihyo, Sosui's cavalry, and Sugin's infantry are allowed to fully focus on attacking, and made such remarkable progress that it could only be described as like lightning. And then we see some of the other offensive units going in, but I have to say, Denyu has the best lines of the chapter, as he says that the strategist told them to keep facing forward and no turning back, and that if they're worried about their friends behind them, then to kill all the enemies that stand before them. And I just really thought it was such a beautiful statement, you know, killing the enemy while at the same time protecting your friends. Essentially, killing two birds with one stone. And even though this is honorable of Denyu, it's not something that's always so easy to do. But the incoming Zal tell Denyu not to get ahead of himself, because the ones to die here will be them.
Bruh.
But out of nowhere, Shin burst onto the scene, destroying these guys and rallying his men to keep moving forward. Across the field, we see Banyo and the Gyokuho looking on at the Hishin unit and the way they're fighting. And they notice that they're fighting without any regard for their endangered comrades, and that this is something that up until now they had never done before. But Banyo knows that anything less than this, and they'd have no hope of winning this day. But then, seeing that the Gyun army is making its move, Banyo has his troops move out. And we find out from Banyo that Gyun most likely won't take to the field this day. So their only real job today is to prevent the Gyun army from interfering with the Hishin unit. But Banyo vows to Ohan, even though he's not there, the Gyokuho will fulfill its duty, even if it costs them their lives. Then we find ourselves over at Chigaryu's HQ, and we see that he's receiving reports that the Hishin unit is pushing them back on multiple fronts. The messengers actually seem to be in a bit of a panic because they're getting so destroyed. But Chigaryu calms everyone down, saying that they're wreaking havoc on the Hishin unit as well, and that there's no need to match their fighting style. And pretty much the opposite of Ten's strategy, he has no problem sending out reserves, and especially wants them sent wherever Shin is on the battlefield. And Chigaryu says that they'll pay dearly for throwing away all thoughts of defense against his soldiers, because all of his men are well versed in tactics and strategy, and that soon it shall be their turn to have their faces turn pale. And then, as if almost on cue, we see Bihei and his men surrounded by a group of Zao soldiers. They're unable to fall back and appear to be surprised that they were cornered like this. And as all of Bihei's men are falling all around him, it looks like he's finally done for. But then Shosa comes in with the last second save, and Bihei, probably nearly crapping his pants, tells Shosa thanks because he really saved their asses. And an exhausted Shosa can only look at Bihei in disbelief, as he says to Bihei, "I take my eyes off you for 1 second." And that was the chapter in a nutshell, guys. Alright guys, so that was another good chapter at Kingdom. But the one thing in this chapter that really just rubbed me the wrong way is, what is up with the Zao superiority complex? And mainly from their leadership. For instance, in the last chapter, Chigaryu talking about defeating the Chin in half a day. And it kind of seems like even though Gyun and Chigaryu said they wouldn't underestimate him anymore, they kind of still do. And honestly, for Gyun and Chigaryu, I can kind of give them a pass because they're new to the Shin game. They really don't know that this is what he does. But when it comes to Roboku and Kane, these guys should absolutely know that just because Shin is the last major piece on that battlefield doesn't really mean anything. Not to mention they're underestimating 2 major pieces of the Hishin unit, Kyokai and Ten. But getting back on track with Chigaryu, maybe he has some aces up his sleeve that are making him kind of confident, because I remember earlier in the arc around chapter 536, we were introduced to Joe Sho and Joe Rin from Chigaryu's army, and they made a pretty brief appearance, but it seems like these guys were like the martial might for Chigaryu. So I think it would be kind of cool if they came back into the story, and if they did come back into the story, I think it would be pretty cool if we seen them go up against some of the second tier people in the Hishin unit. Nobody like Shin or Kyokai, but maybe somebody like En, Shosa, Sugen, Soshi, people like that. And even though I don't want to see this happen, a good way for us to see those characters as a serious threat is if they were to take out one of these second tier characters. Because even though I hate to admit it, I kind of feel like horror is setting us up for a couple of deaths on the Hishin unit. And I kind of think it might be one of the veterans, and I could actually see them going down trying to protect a rookie, maybe somebody like Kanto. And one thing I found that was really surprising about this chapter was I really wasn't expecting Gyun to have to miss a day of battle. But I can't even really blame him because he did have a hole in his arm. But the funny thing is this, right? If Gyun misses this day and then is back on the battlefield the following day, just how bad does that make Akko look? I mean, I feel like he's been passed out for 10 days. And even though he's getting an extra day to rest, I really can't imagine there being any sort of circumstance where he's back to anywhere near 100% for the remainder of this battle. But the one thing we can't overlook is that this was all Banyo's opinion. He's assuming that Gyun won't take the field, so it'll be pretty funny if in the next chapter, we see Gyun and his glaive of nightmares still wrecking stuff with his weak hand. I can almost hear the backstory now. Under Rinsojo, we were made to train both our dominant and weak arms, just in case we were ever put in this type of predicament. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about in this chapter, so let's move on to the comment of the week. And this week's comment comes from 0Q2012, and what he had to say was, "Okay, so Gyo is done, but what is the next step for Chin? eat the refugees. And I can't lie, when I first read this comment, it had me cracking up. But it actually has like serious implications, because with the food now being burnt in Gyo, that's pretty much it when it comes to the food. Like in a more recent review, I was discussing how maybe Ozen could use Gyo's food for his soldiers. But after seeing Gyo's food stores completely burned, it seems like that is clearly out of the picture. And the one solution that I'm seeing brought up a lot recently is the fact that Yotawa could provide them with food. And even though I think that's technically true, there's 2 reasons why I think that would be a terrible solution to this problem. Heck, he already let us know in chapter 575 that because of Zal's defensive web, there was no way to get any messages through, let alone wagons of food. And the second major thing is, capturing Ryoyu was never really a part of the original plan. All they were ever really meant to do was just to keep the Zal army occupied so that they couldn't liberate Gyo. So for Ozen to be depending on some food from a city that wasn't even supposed to be conquered seems like a bit of a stretch to me, especially when you consider who we're talking about here. So I do think Ozen has some other arrangements when it comes to the food situation, and it's just one of them things where we're gonna have to wait and see what happens. But anyway guys, that about does it for this week's review. Let me know what you guys all thought of the chapter in the comments section below. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and feel free to share, comment, and subscribe. Peace out!